recording now.
Oh, that infinity loop is...
If you spend enough time with OBS. Okay. Just gonna do a shared screen.
You're saying you get desensitized to the infinity loops?
Mm-hmm.
You're over it.
I'm over it. We're gonna give a few more minutes for folks to roll in.
I'm so bummed that people aren't here.
It's fine. Less pressure for me. I think a few people said that they're gonna come, but
I know Adam wanted to come.
yeah, is he coming?
Sounds like slime.
How do you know?
Slime?
Slime? And the solid boost too. You picked up Candy's book?
Oh, Pseudo gave it to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, what is he going to speak about? And Pseudo said.
That's about right, yeah.
Hi. I was wondering if I should stream it just on the Mars Discord, but I can't stream at the two Discord at the same time.
Apparently I was having goofy dreams last night.
Oh, okay.
I don't remember them, but I went to bed stoned and Nico said I was like chuckling in the middle of the night.
He's like, oh.
I wish we knew what it was. If only you could like record. Like you could like go to bed and then record, and then when you're in REM.
Okay. Hi folks. I think there might be some people online. How are you doing? I see an IMU. And I'm Matt Dekausi. Nice to meet you guys. Hi. Hello.
Hello.
I'll put it on the mic burner. First I gotta come up with my toothpaste.
You wanna co-host with me?
Well,
be here.
are you sure?
Yeah.
I wanted to be your student as well.
No, but you can be here. It's fine. Okay, this is actually my favorite session of Solarpunk Societies.
Yay!
Woo! And we call it the network state of Solarpunk communities. And so today we're gonna just go through a lot of really cool communities, from eco-villages to co-living co-hubs, and explore their similarities and differences. And so are we familiar with the idea of a network state, which is kind of recently pointed out by this guy? And I'm gonna just restate, a network state is a highly aligned online community with the capacity for collective action that crowdfunds territory around the world and eventually gains diplomatic recognition for pre-existing states. So it's basically, instead of nation state, it's the idea of people, instead of being bounded by geologic boundaries, people unite around ideologies instead of physical boundaries. So but for people that live in the same country, we might not agree with the same rules, but for people that live in the same network state, you have this freedom to hop in between different states, and based on your preferences on which nation state and which, I guess, collective you align more with. And so the perceived vision of a network state is from a group of people with shared vision to a sovereign nation connected over the internet. It's very out there kind of concept, but it's becoming more and more popular in the past few months, especially in the space of decentralized governance, where people are kind of fed up with legacy institutions, and then they're looking for alternative ways for governing ourselves. So the topic of today is the network state of Solarpunk communities. Basically, starting from last year at Mars, we went on this long journey on exploring what kind of alternative communities are out there. And what we discovered is that there's already so many communities trying to not do exact what Mars is doing, but kind of trying to live outside of what you would call the matrix. And we realized that they are sort of already becoming what you would call the beginning stage of a network state, right? These communities have very shared value. They all hate capitalism in a way. They're all trying to be more sovereign. They're all trying to grow their own food. They're all trying to figure out how to get along with their neighbors. And so at Mars, last year at Mars, we made this meme that kind of just captured what Agartha is all about. So jumping from thinking broken societal problems can be fixed by an angry tweet to someone that went to Burning Man and got addicted to glamping, to the next stage of people working at nonprofit, recycle religiously, being involved with local governance, to the next stage of living off-grid, being self-sustainable in a creative community, implement alternative governance structures, to, in the end, creating a platform for value-aligned communities of governance to virtually playtest, subsequently actualize decentralized societies tailored to needs of the members, then document outcomes, even though that never really happened for us, but it's the idea.
Not yet.
Not yet, that's the goal. And we went on a lot of research about one of the biggest body of these kind of alternative communities are eco-villages. So we pulled some data from the Global Eco-Village Network, which is this nonprofit funded by the UN or supported by the UN. And they showed some really compelling result on just lifestyles in eco-villages compared to your standard default. For example, 90% of them have more than 40% women in decision-making bodies. That's more than a lot of countries these days. 85% of them compost all of their food waste, which is really, really incredible stats.
Yeah.
90% of them recycle, reuse, repair more than 50% of consumer goods. And 80% have agreed upon methods for resolving conflict, blah, blah, blah. So yeah, really, really good stuff eco-village people are doing. And there are existing catalogs of where you can discover an eco-village all around the world, and they are gen.org and ic.org. Basically, you go on these websites and you're able to find a massive amount of eco-villages everywhere.
A bunch in Spain and Morocco.
Not so much in Asia, but yeah, a lot in Europe and a lot all over the world, in India, Africa. And basically, a lot of these, you can find definitely some interesting eco-villages, but because these are kind of legacy organizations that have been around for decades, it's kind of hard to find updated information. And a lot of these eco-villages, because they live off-grid, they're far away from your default tech world. It's really hard to get updated information from them. But it's a really cool way to discover, if you are in an area, you want to explore eco-villages, this is some almost like a Wikipedia for eco-villages. And so these are some of the more well-designed, well-made eco-villages all around the world, from Dancing Rabbit, which is one of the most famous eco-villages in the US right now. I think you can even book a time to stay. You can pretty much book a time to stay in any of these eco-villages, where if you want to try out this communal eco-village lifestyle, each of them have different rules. Some of them, treat themselves more like an Airbnb, where they allow visitors to stay. Some of them have a more strict interview process, where they don't really want outsiders to disturb their existing culture. So they will run through some sort of interview process. Some of them you could do work trade with. And each of them have a different ways of decision-making process. So, for example, one of the eco-villages that I had the luck to visit, which is called Lama Foundation at Taos, they've been around for 50 plus years. They started in the 60s and started when the hippie commune movement was at the height. And they were the only hippie commune in the area that still stayed after all that years. And I asked them what's the secret, how do you stay? And they're like, number one secret is that we do not allow drug use in public space, which is really important because that promoted a lot of productivity among people. And that was one of the reasons why a lot of other eco-villages failed, because people started to do just a bit too many drugs. And then things start to fall apart. And another thing that they're doing that's really special is decentralized governance. So the founders founded this place. They wrote a charter, kind of some sort of constitution for the village. And they emphasized that there should be no ruler or no kind of controller of the village for more than a certain period of time. So they have a very strict rotating role on who's in charge. And for all the residents that's living in the village for a certain amount of time, you will have to be in charge for at least an X period of months every year or every couple years. And then they see the role of people taking control, not as the people that's dictating things, but more as the person that's serving the community.
I think that comes from Athens, Greece.
Athens, you mean democracy?
Ancient ancient Athens, they would take, I mean, it wasn't
Rotating.
everyone, it was like a certain class of people, but they would take turns being in, like, running the government. And everybody had to take a turn running the government.
Yeah.
So that way, like, you would at least understand what your friends were going through when they were making decisions.
Yeah, exactly. Running the government is not an easy job. It's really hard and it's very time consuming. So I think in an eco village where you see like it's a nation state where you don't have that many people, so that every person kind of have to take control of certain things. And so that's like, at least from what they shared, some of the reasons how they got to last for a long time, because they have these really strict rules. And another really interesting thing for them is that they were like a very fierce and advocate for religious freedom. So they founded on the principle of like radical religious inclusivity. So they would like ask people from all different religions to create a sanctuary for all these people. So they will celebrate Shabbat on Friday and then a Muslim holiday on Sunday, and then they allow this to be a safe space for everyone to celebrate their religion, which I thought was something super unique. Another example, Tamara in Portugal. It's also a very long-lasting eco-village. I think they've been around for 30 years. And their whole motto is free, open, love. So it's a free love community where for all the research they've been doing, they think that a lot of eco-villages fall apart because of interpersonal drama. Right? So like 10 young, attractive, capable people living together in a small contained space, and people start to have these feelings for each other, drama, and cheating and non-communication, and then eventually the whole group fall apart because of we don't really know how to handle our romantic attractions. So what Tamara was really famous for, where they like really emphasized on these kind of what they call love school and love workshops, where they encourage people to be very expressive about how they feel about each other and be able to handle rejections, respect boundaries, communicate clearly, and not letting these interpersonal drama get into their personal life of living with each other in a harmonious way. So I've been in proximity with Tamara. I've never really visited, but I've always just heard a lot of great things about it. It was one of the biggest village. I think right now they have like about 100 people. From the people that went to Tamara, what they said is like, oh, it's as if you were to build this village if you are on a lot of LSD. And basically, the village feels like free flowing, it's beautiful and things get done when it gets done, but somehow the toilets are still functioning. There's still showers. So sounds like a really interesting place to visit. And so now I want to just like focus on a few more really unique examples that I've discovered throughout just last whole year of traveling, where the first one I want to share is this place called Traditional Dream Factory. And they are this village not that far from Tamara in Portugal, where I think they recently also established themselves as the first land-based DAO in Europe. So they spent 2 years kind of paving this road on legalizing themselves as a DAO. And for folks though that aren't familiar with DAOs, we're going to talk more about it later. But DAO stands for Decentralized Autonomous Organization. It's basically a co-op whose governance rule is imprinted on the blockchain. So that the idea is that bunch of people get together with a shared vision, and then they design their governance rule on like, this is how we like to be governed, and then they put that as like code. And then they use some sort of digital token to represent the voting power. And because the governance rule is put as code, no one can change that and no one can kind of like dispute that. And then they're just using kind of blockchain as a way of keeping information and tracking information. And one of the like really beautiful things I found about Traditional Dream Factory, aka TDF, is that they have 3 pillars of I guess their ethos, philosophy. Regeneration, which means like respecting nature, like doing permaculture stuff. They've planted 500 trees just in the matter of a year, and they're gonna plant more. And their whole plan is to regenerate the whole area by planting trees, permaculture, and they compost like religiously, and then they advocate a lot of like the regeneration principle. And the second pillar of TDF is technology. So they don't want to be I guess they see themselves as a traditional eco-village, but they see themselves as a place for like this new age of techno hippies. There's a bunch of DAO people in there, a lot of software people. And I met some really incredible, super talented engineers who's, able to work on like massive scale solar and other renewable energy solutions for these villages. And they also have a really, really well documented governance system. Everything goes on vote, and then they are educating their members on how to use tokens to represent your vote. How do you everyone kind of like collectively follows up on like their white paper on like how do you participate in governance, how do you adapt to these newly developed technologies. And so that's the second pillar. And the third pillar of TDF is playfulness. So usually the idea of regeneration, right, and the idea of climate topics is a very heavy topic. And we have a lot of these like climate justice warriors that's just like on the street angry and be like, the earth is on fire, oh my God, wake up everyone, wake up. And it became a really, I don't know, like just agitated topic. So the culture at TDF was that like all the heavy topic, we are gonna talk about it, but we're gonna talk about it in a playful way. And that's kind of just an ideology that's just in the TDF culture, like everywhere you go, usually in co-living situations, like kitchen cleaning and dishwashing is like the number one thing that everyone kind of argues about. People just couldn't figure out how to get their dishes clean. There's always problem. And for example, at TDF, the way they do it is that every time after communal dinner, they will like try to make the dish cleaning as such an attractive and fun activity. They play nice music, everyone dance around, and like if you're new, you want to hang out with people, you want to go clean dishes and like dance and like talk to people. And similar with how they treat their morning routine every morning, and kind of like people get together and do their stand-up, where meet and talk about, what are you gonna work on today. So before we talk about like what are we gonna actually work on, we talk about what's our feeling today, like how do we feel, like, oh, somebody might say, I feel kind of trippy dippy today, I don't know, my head's in the clouds. Some people might say, oh, I feel like I need a hug, and then everyone go hug them. And then it just adding this layer of playfulness really makes the whole work culture just so much more enjoyable. Even though the people still do hard work, the composting toilet still needs to be fixed, and then the irrigation system still needs to be installed, but still like people are doing this in sort of a really funky and fun way. And another thing they do is that they will host these tree planting parties where they get a bunch of tree buds, and then they invite some exotic dance DJ, and then everyone dance and party while planting tree and then regenerating. And it just create like a really incredible experience for everyone around the village. So I think right now TDF is going through a round of innovation and renovation and funding. As you can see at the bottom left, that's kind of like one of the public space where it was just a converted chicken coop. So like it gets really cold in the winter, you can't really live there. And I think right now they're going through the process of crowdfunding to really renovate the place. And then I have some renders of what the new place is gonna look like, but I feel like probably the team would be more comfortable sharing it once it goes public. But all the best wishes for this project, and they're super young. They've only been around for a bit over a year, and I'm really excited to see where they come in the future. And another kind of shining example in the space, it's this village called Future Thinkers. So Future Thinkers, as the name suggests, they've been doing podcasts in the sphere of creating game B type of society for like 10 plus years. So they have all these really amazing guests on their podcast. Like they interviewed Vitalik Buterin before he became big. They interviewed Joe Brewer, who is like one of the godfathers for agroforestry. They interviewed Jordan Peterson, Daniel Schmuchtenberger, who's like one of the big advocates for the game B ecosystem. And basically, they started off as just this couple that interviewed a lot of people in the space of creating alternative societies. And finally, they got to a place that they can kind of fund, and they're funding. I think they actually already got funded on like this beautiful piece of land in British Columbia, and they're building like their vision on what's called like a prototype game B sort of village. I think we might have time to watch a YouTube trailer of the Future Thinker Village.
building new structures, or working in the garden.
Okay. So
We build homes, and over time we'll be adding more new and experimental dwellings. If you want to get your hands dirty, there'll be lots of projects to contribute to, like facilitating events and education programs, building new structures, or working in the garden. We also want to encourage
As a
participants to
co-founder.
start sustainable businesses and be part of the local economy.
If you're a content creator, you can use our multimedia studio to make videos, podcasts, music, design, and other forms of art. Storytelling and knowledge sharing is going to be a huge part of this village, which is why it's one of the first things we're going to set up. We already have an electric vehicle sharing program, so if you need to get picked up or you just want to tour around the area, you can do it. You can also take part in all kinds of outdoor activities and adventures in the area. The Kootenays have some amazing nature to explore, and we plan to use only clean transportation to keep it that way. Over the next 5 years, we're going to be expanding what we do. One of our earlier projects will be to build a makerspace with CNC machines, laser cutters, 3D printers, and
we already
more.
have that.
The idea is to have a creative playground where many ideas can be tried and tested.
If you're already a listener of the Future Thinkers podcast, you're going to love the programs that we'll be hosting, including co-working and co-living stays that are focused on developing regenerative practices, workshops and festivals, hackathons and idea incubators, outdoor and wilderness adventures, and lots of personal development retreats.
We've partnered with friends, family, and
I think that's enough. But
What area is this in?
it's in British Columbia. So there's actually a lot of villages, like Game B village in the British Columbia in Canada. Because I think, I don't know, like a bunch of founders, they live there. So like the Game B sphere are kind of big in that area.
Sorry, I might have missed it. What is Game B?
Oh yeah, so a bit of an introduction on Game B. So Game B is kind of this philosophical framework, or what you'll call a social movement, to advocate for like an alternative societal model. So assuming existing, like, okay, I'm just gonna read this. Call the world's current civilization Game A. We believe Game A has some serious fundamental problems that mean we can't keep playing it forever. This community is trying to figure out what a viable, better civilization could look like and how to reach it. We're calling that alternative Game B. And then basically we can go into some of the concepts. There's ideas of like, you know, doing omni-win, where by designing these systems that, you know, that fits into existing system but creates, like, basically gets rid of or avoids the concept of profit for exploitation, but creating scenarios where like the workers, the producers, and the buyers and everyone is winning from the system. So it's a very abstract concept, and it's definitely like a deep rabbit hole to fall into, but it's basically these people getting together and wanting to like create a better society that's more long-lasting, more sustainable, while working with the existing society on certain levels.
It just sounds like a bunch of big words to me. What are the actual like activities or structure or that they're advocating?
I think like one of the regenerative village is a big movement from the Game B system, where they're thinking about, okay, like if default society it's kind of like falling apart for all these reasons. You know, there's climate catastrophe, there's economic like uneven distribution, and then there's like the mental crisis that's overlaid. Basically, this is something that we talked about in the earlier stages on like, you know, like I think it's the 3E, the ecological, the emotional, and the ecological, existential, and economical crisis that the world faces at large, and how these problems are kind of intertwined, where Game B is providing an idea to create alternatives to address these issues. And I think some of the concrete things that they're working on is these prototype villages, where, okay, they create this village, and this village can become like financially self-sustainable, you know, in a way where they offer these activities and values, and then people put value in back, and then create like a lifestyle that's more sustainable. So that's one of the things that the Game B people are doing.
Yeah, but like what's the governance structure?
I mean, I think that really depends on each unique scenarios, right? Like the government structure, I don't know if that's what Game B people are focusing on. That's kind of like what a lot of the DAO people are trying to address, where like different governance structure might fit into different scenario and different villages, like based on some people do full consensus, some people do liquid democracy, some people do, you know, benign dictatorship. So that goes on forever, and I don't know if that's something Game B has covered, but and I was reading a lot about Game B when I first found out about it, and after a while I stopped because the stuff still feels like super high level and very overly theoretical. But if you're interested, like, just check out any podcast by Daniel Schmachtenberger.
I mean,
This
like,
guy.
when I see something like that, I'm immediately disinterested.
I mean, that's fine.
I mean, of
Choose
course,
your own
each-
adventure.
Of course. No, it's just like it seems so like corporate and big words and like.
I feel you on that.
It's like, what
Well,
would
they're
life be like living there?
I mean, like, Mars is its own version of Game B, right? This is just a culture using language that appeals to a certain type of person who wants to live in
Exactly.
that Game B community.
We're not saying that one is better than the other, but it's obvious that the Future Thinkers culture and the Mars College culture and the TDF culture is completely different, right? So the idea is that all these communities have their own culture and their own thing, their own structure, and we start to see that we actually have the freedom to choose the culture that works for us, right? Like, if you don't really like,
Of course.
yeah.
I think
But
what's
then
more
it's like it's so vague. So
yeah,
it's
but
like,
I think what's
the-
more
the
important
point?
is that the underlying pillars are the same, right? Which is that we all care about regeneration. We all care about creating a new type of equitable society. Like, I think that's really all that matters, not the language or the abstractions of what's used.
I don't
Yeah.
know, it seems like it's way too big of an umbrella and a lot of nice graphics.
I mean, I totally agree. I cannot say I disagree with you on that. So, but I'm just tossing this information out there. I'm not saying like, oh my God, let's all follow, like, choose your own medicine, make your own judgment, read through it as you wish, do your own research, and then decide on, like, what do you think is appropriate and right. And another village that I really, really want to iterate, it's this place called Ada House. And they're the first Earthship village in the Netherlands. So for people that don't know, Earthship is kind of this formula on building with completely recyclable material into like an entire structure that's like completely off-grid ready and self-sustainable. So with like sourcing water on the roof, with like solar, and with like bio to compost heat, an Earthship is able to sustain yourself theoretically for like in any off-grid situation forever. And it was this formula that's sort of invented in New Mexico by this crazy guy, Michael Reynolds. And basically this formula has been spread around the world, like all over the place. So you can find Earthship in India, Earthship in Southeast Asia, and Ada House, which means Earth House in Dutch, is the first Earthship village in the Netherlands. It was only built like about a year ago. And what's incredible about this is that like this village is in like a town that's not that far away from one of the city hubs, the little town centers called Oost. And all the residents here have regular jobs. Some of them work for the government, some of them, like work just like your regular 9 to 5. But what's incredible is that it's about like 40 to 60 people got into the idea of like, let's just build an Earthship village together. And then everyone got together and then they got in on this vision. Everyone bought land like collectively with some sort of legal agreement. And the entire village were built by the resident on site without like many of the residents being an experienced builder. So they had like a few people that are kind of the guidance of the group, but everything else was completely built by the residents on land. And I had luck to chat with some of these people when I was visiting the Netherlands, and then they were saying like, I've never met a group of people that I trust this much because we literally build each other's houses. Like I will leave my bank account like open on my table while I invite like all my neighbors to come in. I completely trust them. And then the fact that these people are building together on such a serious project together and shed many sweat and tears together into like when things are not working out, and in the end it became kind of this village where people really trusted each other and became really close. And I heard many times as I was talking with the residents, people are saying like, I literally think that we live in paradise. And you do not hear that from almost anywhere you go. You don't hear people saying that. And another interesting thing is that kind of the founder of this project, the guy who pulled everyone together and like expressed his vision, his name is Paul. He right now like just does not have most income or any sort of job, where all of his food is locally sourced with a local food garden. He does not pay energy bill. He goes around and does lecture about like earth building, about permaculture, about regeneration. He doesn't expect any income from these lecture, where from his word is like, I live way below the poverty line in Netherlands standard, but I live in such a rich life. All my needs are taken care of. And when I heard that, I was like, wow, that's like an incredible experience or incredible example on how you are completely away from the matrix, but you live in such, like a luxury almost standard of life. Where Europe was hit with the energy crisis this year, where everyone's energy bill went up like 2-3 times, where this village was just untouched. And everyone was just living in so much comfort, everything was so warm, and all the families were so harmonious. So it was a really great example on how things could be done in like a really good way. But now I think it's interesting to kind of point out some of the idea about cultural diversity versus regeneration. So a lot of the eco-villages that we saw and we started researching, that we visited, they all, like, in terms of regeneration, they're all doing a great job. Like, people really, really cared about earth. People really cared about being sustainable and doing things right. But how come, like, eco-villages aren't really that attractive to a lot of people? Like, if I were to tell you, hey, like, come move in with me and a bunch of farmers so we can start planting trees every day, versus, like, come to Mars College and then build really cool, fun art projects and meet people from all over the world, like, what do you think is the, like, the difference between these two proposals? And like, I'm assuming that it's very obvious that one is more attractive than the others, right? And I guess, do we want to, like, maybe I can ask the group, like, why do you think one is more attractive than the others?
I think they both, I mean, it depends who you're talking to. If you're talking to us, we're here, so like, it's obvious. But if you're talking to most people, both of them are probably unattractive.
Both were unattractive?
to most
I mean, that's a really good point.
To most normies.
Yeah.
I don't know if they would be able to pick one versus another. They both. In fact, some people might say the farm, well, there's more bearings for what a farm is. Maybe not living collectively on a farm, but living on a farm. People have bearings about that, but this is like, it's so hard to explain.
Yeah. So what do you think, either Mars or eco-villages, what do you think makes it unattractive to people? Is it because they need to get out of their comfort zone, or is it because it's too far, or?
Well, to me, when I think of farming, I think of waking up at 5 a.m. and working for like 12 hours a day. And that it's not, I can appreciate that, but I don't know if I want to do that my whole life. Or like for a long period of time.
So the mundaneness of farming.
Yeah, I don't think I want to be a farmer, although I would love to grow things on a smaller scale.
Right.
I enjoy the way I can make income in doing something I enjoy more than farming, and then use that income to get the food I need. It's kind of like easy. Right. When you tell kind of like people that are used to a certain standard of lifestyle, like, let's go farming, people almost think, oh, like, it's like a step back. Like, I don't want to be a farmer. Farming sucks, and it's really tiring, and it's a lot of work, and you don't make that much money at all. And also, like, there's this idea of kind of farming related to like a less intellectually developed society, where countries with less dependency on their farming exports are considered as countries that's more successful, the countries that has more of a diverse culture and more advanced technology. Where if we look at the country's GDP and like if it's majority of farming, then we're like, oh, that's a poor country, because you don't know anything. So that's kind of like the standard, like the traditional way of like understanding, like regeneration at large, and then why I think a lot of people are now dying to jump into the regenerative scene, because there's still this layer of understanding on how like regeneration being connected to traditional farming. So that's some sort of the conclusion that we reached out as we are exploring these projects and kind of brainstorming on, like, what do we want to, how can we encourage more people to join the off-grid, self-reliant, regenerative scene, and how can we make this more attractive to people, right? Like how can we make this not feeling like you're like farming with your Uncle Joe forever, and you're saying bye to all the excitement of the city, no more art shows, no more bands. And how can we really, like, can we have the best of both worlds?
Well, it's kind of like what you just said about Tomorrow, where they like try to make things fun by playing lively music and stuff, so that people are like incentivized to clean dishes after dinner. And it feels like Moz kind of has that balance well, where it's like we have people like Sam who are super into like actually doing very similar to like what the Earthship stuff is, but it's done in such a way that it's done in a way that's like attractive and I guess like sexy and like a corporate speak thing. So I think Moz balances both pretty well already.
Yeah, so Mars is like a really unique example, but it's not really that easy to find all around the world. So like what we've also noticed is that a lot of people in the region scene, they're like so deep in the region scene, and then they're like still there's this bridge that seems to could be made of kind of like people that are not yet regions and then getting introduced to things that's regions, that's more region focused. So that's why as we started to research more on different communities, we're like, okay, like what are some of the communities where people can kind of get together in a collective, still enjoy this idea, or like get some sort of ideology, inspiring ideology at a place where they can start to question some sort of a default lifestyle, while it's like not yet fully like self-sustainable solar punk regeneration yet. And here are some of the examples that we found that could be some of those places that's building this bridge. And number one is artist towns. So like aside from Bombay Beach, there's this place called Marfa, Texas, where like in Bombay, I think started slightly differently, but Marfa just started with this one artist, that Donald Judd, who's like very well known in the minimal artist architecture scene. And then he decided to just move to the middle of nowhere in Texas and start to like build crazy art structure. And he attracted a lot more artists to move in, and then eventually became an artist town. And now it's one of those places that you don't expect to have a lot of excitement and art scene, but suddenly there's there. And I'm sure throughout this way, people start to kind of also question like the way that things are done in a traditional sense, right? Like, why did Donald Judd move to the middle of Texas instead of staying in New York? Well, like the rent is going to be a lot cheaper. Like he can get so much more land with the same amount of capital, and he has a free range to build whatever he wants. And then this idea of like radical freedom and then like thinking really outside of the box kind of became the foundation of the emergence of a lot of these artistic cities, artistic towns, similar with Bombay Beach, where we are very close with. And I'm sure there's like a bunch that's similar scenarios in different countries. I think Will mentioned he knew this place called something in England. I did not write that down, but I'm sure there's like these kind of things all over the world. And another really interesting, I think, alternatives that's kind of creating this bridge to bringing people to region space is land-based DAOs. So we talked about DAOs a little bit. I think we're gonna have a very long dedicated session on how DAOs work. But essentially, aside from the technical side of DAOs, basically DAOs are a byproduct from the crypto movement, and then it became a way for people all over the internet to unite under one vision. So the idea of city DAO is something that's quite fascinating, where when DAO first became legalized and like became recognized as legal entities, city DAO started as literally just the founder shooting up a tweet on Twitter, be like, can we start a DAO to build a city, or can we start a DAO to buy land together? And then that tweet just blew off, and then a bunch of people joined the team. They launched a NFT collection where the NFT represents governance right on collectively owning land. Then they bought a piece of land with the money they funded with NFTs. And then City DAO just became, kind of blew up in 2-3 weeks, where it became like a massive online organization of 10,000 people from all over the world wanting to build some sort of city together. And what's incredible is that like these people did not know each other. They had no connection with each other whatsoever. But because this one shared vision, they all became kind of they became like available to each other. Like they created some sort of online community from nothing almost. And so that's kind of how a lot of DAOs are operating, where like someone has this idea, let's do a DAO to do this, and then a bunch of people got into it, and then you join the Discord, and you just out of nowhere you start to have all these internet friends, And land-based DAOs are DAOs that are working with projects and assets that's in real life. So these DAOs, they sort of kind of like have physical spaces to bring people together, this online community together in physical space and let them meet each other. That's how I met Alina, where we, after last year in Mars, I went on this kind of this building retreat hosted by Cabin DAO, where they invite people to go to their property and help them build some sort of structure. And we worked together to build a sauna. And
We did not.
and then I met you right
Oh,
after
yeah.
that. And like, Alina was there, and one thing led to another. That's how we met. And similar story with CityDAO. I think I discovered with CityDAO from an article Freeman shared in the Mars College Discord, written by Vitalik Buterin about decentralized cities. And I was reading through it, and I was like, wow, CityDAO, super cool. Let me join the Discord. And I joined the Discord. It's like 10,000 people, okay? And then people were chatting about like these city projects and how does governance work. And I was just discovering so many interesting articles to read. And then I saw that in the CityDAO Discord channel, there's like a IRL channel, like people meeting in real life. So I was like, guys, I live in LA. Like, who's also in LA? Let's meet up. And then out of nowhere, 10 people showed up. And then we had like a really nice picnic. I met another Martian at the meetup. And then the current kind of like community organizers at CityDAO saw what I did. And then he decided to feature me. So he featured my meetup in the newsletter, and then he really encouraged me to be like, you should host more meetup. And one thing led to another. I was encouraged to do more stuff for CityDAO, and eventually I started working with them officially and started like as an official like contributor to CityDAO, where I was getting like crypto payrolls and like helping them to host calls and going to networking events. And it just happened from like a random Discord server. I mean, there's like no formula in how these things operate, but it's just a really fun and new way of people meeting each other through the strange web of the internet.
I do.
No.
I do think it's important to note, though, that so far DAOs, well, not all DAOs, but land-based DAOs specifically, have not yet nailed it. Where, like, I no longer work with either Cabin or Cohere at this point. But the cool benefit of DAOs, which is kind of what Nico is insinuating, is that, like, you can go into a DAO to meet people with whom you align on culture. Again, with the future thinking, you might not align with the way that they use language, but you align with the foundational pillars of like why they're building a new society. So you meet people that you can then leave the DAO with. And so it's like I met Nico through Cabin, and not really part of Cabin, but I'm part of Nico.
But we're part of each other. Yeah, so it's a great way. It's because, a lot of these Discord that are just kind of open to public for some certain extent. You go, and then there's monthly calls, people do weekly calls. You hop on the call, you start having conversation with people, and then people share ideas. Like if you have a project idea, you're like, guys, I own this piece of land. Like I want to have people like help me build it. And then people can kind of like tell you, hey, I know how to build things. Maybe maybe we can work together. So it's a really great way for you to meet more vision aligned and ideologically aligned people in a completely brand new way. And that's where I think the potential of DAO is, aside from like, being part of the crypto industry or whatever.
I have a question, and please defer this to the DAO session later if it's too big of a topic. But like, one thing about DAOs is that they're tech-centric, right? And there's a lot of people in this space that, it's going to be hand-wavy, but your whole class, you're using some words that I'm not really familiar with, but whatever. Communal, eco-minded people often will be tech. You'll commonly find people that are tech averse, right? And how often did you encounter people in CityDAO or in these other ones that were like people that, you often see like older folks sometimes struggle with using technologies, but it's not just generational. Like some of it is built in with mindset. Some people it's intentional even, that like you understand that like being so focused on gadgets and multimedia types of things they're big distractions, and if you're into mindfulness, let's say, then you might be trying to reduce that in your life. And then like this, if you join a community like this, it sounds like the gravity would be pulling you back towards using technology. So like, is that a dichotomy that you've encountered?
Yeah, I think like the nature of DAO like kind of filters out a certain group, or like
It's self-selective.
Yeah, it's
Like,
self-selective.
if you're finding them through Twitter, you're already kind of tech.
Yeah, you're like adaptive to the space. So I mean, there's pros and cons to that for sure. Where like like people like DAO is attracting people that are willing to adapt to a certain level of new technology, right? Like people that are willing to learn. Like, okay, I don't know about this thing, let me learn. I don't know how to use Discord, let me learn it. I don't know how blockchain works, let me learn it. But it's also kind of not attracting the people that, in principle or like fundamentally, are against crypto, which I think it's kind of a shame, where like the crypto industry, you know, it's usually like the loudest one is painting the image of crypto industry. So like when a lot of times when people think about crypto, they think about all these people that's trying to sell you NFTs and they're trying to, so like those people exist and they exist a lot in the DAO space. Like there's a lot of those voices, a lot of these servers, like if you don't have a good community manager filtering out these voices, you just get bombarded with people like, oh, buy my project, or join my project, or invest in this so you'll be a millionaire sort of information. That's sadly the truth. But if you're able to like kind of filter out some of the DAOs, you know, like where they really pay a lot of attention to community building and culture building, they're able to filter out these voices and actually highlight the people that's here to discuss governance, here to discuss important issues. So I say like that you know, it's like a double-edged sword, where like it filters out the people that are unwilling to adapt, but it also filters out the people that's against, I guess, like traditional money in principle. And I can't say if it's pros and cons. I really wish we can have the best of both worlds, but sadly that's kind of how it is right now.
Yeah. To add two things to that, like one, I'm of the opinion that DAOs should be, the way that DAOs use on-chain infrastructure should be entirely separate from like financial gain. Like at most, if you're using tokens or NFTs, they should be representative. They should not be this speculative thing where like instead of Nico getting paid in crypto that she then has to cash out, which is like mutually non-beneficial to all parties, because like then DAOs lose money every time there's like payday and that sort of stuff. It should just be representative of like governance and contribution in general. The second thing to your point though, and it doesn't fully address what you're saying about tech wary people, but like a lot of indigenous communities have adapted to tech because tech is not an inherently bad thing. Like a lot of like Scandinavian indigenous communities in the Laplands use helicopters and guns in order to like hunt, and like that's also part of the reality is that we live in a tech-based society. That doesn't mean that we have to adapt to all types of tech, but that means that we can leverage the parts that work for us in different communities, and I don't know, that's about it.
Yeah, actually a lot of eco communities that we've explored are very interested in the DAO concept. They just don't really know how to get into it. So I've like, you know, at these kind of like regenerative rebuild conference, people are generally very curious. They're like, what is DAO? How do I get into it? How do I use it? How do I use this to govern our eco village? And that's why traditional Dream Factory was a really shiny example, because they're like have one foot in both worlds, where they are well educated, well versed on DAOs, but they're also very well connected in the eco world. And you know, like something like that don't quite exist in that many places yet, but I think it's an emerging trend where people are becoming more and more open-minded to this technology, where they see the technology as a tool instead of as a culture that's predominating on certain ways on how we think and act. So. And another example that we found was like these certain hacker spaces all around the world. So a really famous one, a lot of Martians that used to hang out as Noisebridge in San Francisco. Like, does anyone know Noisebridge? Yeah, we have a few. So it's like this anarchist hacker space where they have, I think their rule is that they have no rules, and it's some sort of democracy going on. So like you join this collective and then you just go democracy. Like you basically like follow certain sort of cultural rule. You know, it's not, no one says that you are not allowed to take any equipment or make whatever you want. But if you do that, maybe people will frown upon you if they notice. So there's no clear written rules, but still it's a very, very selective functioning community, and people do make a lot of really, really cool stuff over there. And there's similar communities like Baby Castles in New York, where like a lot of game developers and multimedia people hang out at, host shows. And the differences between these communities and like what you would call traditionally like a co-working space or a coffee shop is that they're very community centered, right? Like you go to these places, maybe sometimes you do have to pay an entrance fee, but if you go to these places enough, you really get to know the community, you get to know the culture, you get to know the place instead of like, oh, going to WeWork and I just work there for hours and I don't know anyone living there. So they're removing this sort of transactional based human interactions and make it more into like a bunch of people gathering together out of ideology alignment, which I think hacker spaces and artist collectives definitely should be counted similar as eco-villages, both all under this umbrella of intentional communities, right? There are like these communities trying to live more intentionally. Some are regenerative, some are artistic, some are more tech focused, but they all sort of sharing this like greater umbrella of like, we are like this community, we are getting together under the same kind of ideology, and then a lot of these share similar concepts of like anti like default or anti like institution in a lot of ways. And the last one I guess I want to just like gently touch is that there are all these new projects of future cities. Like the one that I hate the most is the line, which I don't know if we're familiar with this. This is some people figured out it's a really cool thing to just build a massive line in
Just like a 5 mile line.
in a 5 mile line as a city, and then it's all futuristic, and it like there's so many YouTube videos to shit on this project where like like I don't know why that person was flying, but it's like a giant massive line of cluster fucking claustrophobic.
Once you're in like such a line, you could create crazy electromagnetic on the walls, right?
Yeah.
Just like
You should check out Paulo Soleri, who did Arco Santi, and he has these books. I can't remember what the theory is called.
Arcology.
Oh yeah.
Arcology.
They're beautiful.
Yeah.
And it really makes it look so wonderful to be in this
In a
fleshed out
line.
That
Honestly, the
we-
first time I saw the advertisement, I was like, boring.
Really?
Oh,
Am I the
fuck
only
this.
hater here?
No,
Okay,
I'm like,
sorry.
everyone else
I'm
was
very
like, fuck
opinionated.
this.
We have several people that are friends of Martians that are that live and work at Arco Santi, and we've talked about doing some sort of exchange. I actually haven't gotten in touch with
That's
my
awesome.
friends, but Pseudo went and visited after Mars last year.
Yeah.
He has a friend there.
Right on. Someone-
I've got a friend.
Yeah, I think someone visited from Arco Santi last year too.
That's right. Yeah.
Tim was here for one of the Spark Talks, and he lived in Arco for several years. He doesn't anymore.
Wait, is this the line thing that is?
No,
Arco
the line
Santi,
is
or
in
It's a different
Arco
thing?
Santi. I didn't list it here because I thought it was already built. So these are sort
It
of
is already built.
speculative projects that's in the build right now. But Arco, why? What?
Arco Santi is built, but arcology was his theoretical concept about what would it be like to build societies in a line with like 12 different stories, and each story has a different function. And it's just,
That's
I always thought it was very beautiful.
It's beautiful, yeah, totally agree. I think I definitely feel like maybe Arco Santi deserve its own slides here. Apologies for not including it, but it's definitely like a really phenomenal project somewhere in Arizona where, it's like this vision from this architect years ago, and then it was very slowly built, and it was very cooperative, communal, and I think residents get voted in or out whether they can stay on there for longer or shorter period of time. They do host like festivals and music events there, and I think they operate more in a way of trying to be sustainable, and in terms like every person that lives in Arco Santi contributes to living there instead of paying your way in, which I think
They host a lot of events.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
People visit, so they have workshops that
they have generating
and-
income.
yeah, so they do generate. I think the model has changed a little bit more recently, where they no longer need to rely on. They made these bells, like I guess.
Yeah.
Very nice bells that you can learn. to make.
Collectives.
But it would give you a chance to go visit.
Yeah.
But,
So
but my friend that lives there reports a kind of clear divide of the people that have been voted in and do work, and I don't know exactly who they are, but the other people. Like there's kind of like a cultural divide that's kind of similar to the people who throw like a festival versus the people who go to a festival.
Right. Yeah, I mean that's just inevitable, right? Like when you have people that contribute so much to the project, of course there's gonna be some sort of divide. But yeah, I think Arcosanti almost deserves its own time to be discussed as like probably the only like mass scale or bigger scale and like sort of like at the bigger scale of a village and smaller scale of a society, like kind of in between a village and a society, where I think they have like 100 people or something.
I mean,
like
there's a
200
lot
people.
of, some of the communities you showed were probably about that scale.
I think so, but I think Arcosanti has a very
Arcosanti
unique.
has a vision.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But what's actually been made is still relatively small and smaller than a lot of the other things. So it's like they have this arcology concept. What's been implemented is this like, little
Very beginning.
core thing. But it's been around for 35 years, so but anyway, it's on par with some of the other ones.
It's like
Right.
60 to 80 people year round.
Oh really? Oh, it's a lot tinier than I thought. Okay. Yeah.
Why is this man in this corner of this photo?
Oh, so he's a rapper called Akon, and he wants to build a city called Akon City. So it's like this is the vision. So if you go, do we any Akon fans here? Nobody
The entire
listens to
city's gonna
Akon.
be auto-tuned.
Yeah, entire city. So his vision is to build this crazy city in Senegal, and I've actually,
Insane.
heard some stories. I cannot say if it's true of people working in this project that there is some questionable decisions in the internal organization. So a lot of these speculative projects, I don't really know if it's actually gonna get made, but I think it's just people putting their visions out there and making it happen. And then some of them might happen. I'm definitely bullish on Regen Villages and the Next Gen Village. So Regen Villages is by James Ehrlich, who's, I forgot, Harvard, MIT or whatever. He's been studying like high-tech eco-villages for 10 plus years. And it's an ongoing project where people can sign up and buy in, supported by the UN, where they follow all these climate rules. The idea is to create like a massive scale village that's regenerative, that's modern. But basically, like, regeneration is not a concept that people are unfamiliar with anymore. Aside from like more grassrooty eco-villages movement, there's also these bigger players that's getting into the regenerative scene. And yeah, and aside from that, in the end, like, I want to, I guess, show for our project one more time where basically we are creating this map that allows people to discover these communities, and then we're adding more and more of these communities to there, and hopefully we might collaborate with other similar projects that's trying to do similar things in the space. But hopefully we want this map to be an ongoing library that more and more people can discover projects like Mars, projects like Arcosanti, and projects like TDF. And kind of, the idea is that we want to list all the available options out to people, and then letting people choose their own adventure in a way.
Nomadic, I feel like nomadism is a whole sort of like alternative path that you don't include even in your broad categories.
Yeah, I think this is something that we haven't thought of before, but it's definitely a lot of these projects are open to nomad visits. So, and like a potential next step could be like kind of connecting these hubs and then like planning nomad trips between these hubs. So some of these projects, they offer people to stay for a month, try out their lifestyle. And then I think by nature, these projects are, like welcoming to nomad people. But there's also places like Kift, which Athens part of, where like it's just a nomadic community by nature with like different hubs that the same community can have access to for van lifers. And I think there was some question in the Discord. Was someone trying to ask something?
Hey there, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I think we can hear you.
No, I just wanted to say thank you because I discovered Unity Co-Living.
Oh, awesome.
Your site. And I just arrived today and checked in, and I'm spending the month of February here. So
Here meaning
I found it through a garden sale.
Oh my god, thank you. That's so meaningful. Thank you. Yeah, Unity Co-Living is awesome. I think I met the founder of that project at TDF, and then she told me about her stuff. So like, I'm so happy you're there. I hope you enjoy.
Yeah, it's been a great resource, and I also applied to TDF and checking out other things. So thank you. You're doing great work.
Oh, thank you. Wow, spot on.
That's so sweet.
Yeah, we nailed it. And I think that's pretty much the end of today's session. So I want to leave this session as like leading up to next session, where today we kind of talked about a lot of these existing communities and what are they all about. And next session will be hosted by Blair, who's been doing a lot of study on like designing governance structure and working with grassroots movement and also designing like interpersonal communication techniques. So I think next session we're gonna just do a fun game of like designing our own community. So if you could design your little like protopia society or whatever, like what kind of vibe would it be, right? Like if you could choose 3 keywords to describe your community, what would it be like? And I think that would be a really fun exercise for us to just think about and jam on idea. Maybe leave this as an open question right now. If anyone has some thoughts on like what kind of community would you want to live in, and same with folks on Discord, feel free to chime in.
I feel like the one of the main things is just sort of this lock-in, of going back to this nomadic thing of like one of the things you get into is either you or a couple friends buy some land, and now it's like you've got this land, you're totally tied to it. Like you have the state on one side putting a bunch of restrictions on you. You have a bunch of like crazy hippies who are coming in and like vaguely like identify with you, and you can't go anywhere. Like it's like you're liable for it. Like you're just kind of stuck a little bit, and so I feel like there's something interesting there to this like kind of van life thing where people have the ability to kind of like regroup in, and sort of if you're not getting along with your neighbors, that you move somewhere where you do get along with your neighbors. It's not fully fleshed out there, and there clearly needs to be places to go, but there's something really interesting about the van life movement in terms of like the freedom that it affords all of the participants, and that you don't necessarily have to find consensus where everybody is fully aligned on the whole deal, that you can kind of gravitate towards the people you like, and things can kind of form a little bit, and it also gives you a little bit of resilience against the state. Like one of the things I've heard people talk a lot about, especially people who are like exploring Costa Rica or something for doing their eco-village, is that a lot of the United States laws are really about this like one domicile per parcel, and that it's really difficult to like 10 acres, 100 acres, 1,000 acres. You're like, it's very difficult to put more than one family, residence on it, and so it's fine so long as all your structures are temporary or you're on wheels or something, you can move if there's a problem, but it keeps you from investing like significant resources in alternative building, and that's one of the things that pushes people to other countries where they're less worried that code enforcement is going to come in and fix it. But I feel like van life also has sort of an interesting sort of answer to it.
I really like that idea. I mean, it's larger than what you just said. I heard you say last year in terms about the episodic nature, at least how we're doing here, and that would be built into a nomadic community. And I think it's something actually really beautiful. Like, I mean, for you alluded, like if there's someone you're not really aligned with, right? When you have an intentional community, like often there's processes, but they're ugly processes for getting rid of somebody, and often those are not just like when you have situations like that, it's hard to really have everybody win, but they're usually situations that are whatever, they're unpleasant, and then there's they escalate to the point where you have to deal with them. Whereas with an episodic community, like there's a finite end to things, and everybody goes home, and that person just won't be invited back, and it makes it's like it's built in to kind of ensure the intentionality. Like you really are here because you want to be part of the community. You're not here because you're bored or aimless or freeloading or anything like that.
Yeah, spot on.
But then, what I was saying, Freeman mentioned last year, that his midterm talk, there's something really lovely about the episodic nature of, let's just say this, but he was equating it with Burning Man, that you learn how to do things better the next year. And so because we take it down and completely, then next year if there's a new idea we want to try, we can try it, and it's not a huge commitment because it's just for one season. It's not forever. And I imagine that I mean, granted, you can't invest as much because you're not going to invest a whole ton in something you're going to take down in 3 months, but whereas like having a huge work party to raise a house makes sense if you're gonna keep the house, for many years.
Yeah.
So, but like in terms of design and structure, and when someone's in a house, how do you like, how do decisions get made? It's a little bit easier when you have to figure that out every time, rather than like someone becomes privileged because they got into this house that happens to be nicer, and there's no real reason to kick them out, but it creates a stratification.
Right, like this episodic kind of design gives us room to make mistakes. Like it doesn't enforce us to commit to a place forever, which is like a lot of times if we don't know the place, if we don't know the people, even if you know them, like it's really hard to live with the same group of people for like 20 years and not get tired of them.
Like, I mean, the Earthship thing, like, it sounds like paradise, but also there's so much paralysis of like, oh my god, once I buy this home, it's like these are the 40 people where like I can't leave this place.
Yeah. But it works for a certain type of group where like I can safely say that the Earthship village in the Netherlands, it works for people in the Netherlands. It's you don't really go there and find a lot of internationals. You don't really go there and find a lot of crazy nomadic artists. It's a lot of families. It's a lot of like people that kind of already share the same culture and feel comfortable with each other, and that makes that formula work for that specific scenario. Where for something else, maybe like it would be a total train wreck.
Well, and also because of that, like there's some people that are living there and it's working, so they don't want to change it. That also creates a barrier to trying something radical. Whereas if you're starting from scratch, it's like, okay, well let's try this new concept. But there is this fear and apprehension for trying new things. And like I was saying earlier, that most normies are gonna find all of these things weird. It's something I think about a lot. Like, it seems to me like there's a huge barrier to starting most of the things that you're talking about. But like there are really simple things that people can do that I think people don't realize, that it doesn't have to be perfect. And like I was saying, the episodic nature, it's nice. Like, hey, let me just try this for 3 months and see what happens. But I think there's a long history of people like who live in cities that are like wish for something different to form a collective. I'm always curious what's the starter kit to get like a whole bunch of people to break down the walls in an apartment and all sleep in one bedroom.
Let me know what you find out.
No, I mean that's something that people did in the 60s, but like it's always interesting when I hear these stories, from a lot of my mentors that lived in the 60s and had a whole flourishing commune movement in the Bay Area. Like when I think about what they were able to participate in and foster, it's so different now because I don't know what it is, but because I wasn't alive then, but it's like everything I hear about, the 60s and early 70s is like a completely different, mental state. And I'm sure there were normies then too, and it's probably the history has made it seem more picturesque, but there was a precedent for doing weird things then. Again, I don't know what it was like because I wasn't there, like how prevalent was it, but you weren't a pioneer doing something, it wasn't too weird to take down the walls, like
right.
Like there were many communes doing things like that.
Yeah.
And now, if you like, you all laughed, like there's a lot of little things that like seem really strange that like again there's like a barrier to even trying them. That I'm always curious, like how can we be more experimental with our willingness to live a certain way?
Yeah, totally. And I think a lot of the intentional communities are working through that. Places like Tamara and places like some other communities that I couldn't like name one right now, but there's all these intentional kind of like breaking down the barrier workshop. There's consensus workshop. There's like kind of boundary workshop where like people start to really like try to get close to each other in a way that they wouldn't usually in like your default society. And I definitely think that like the current like our current mainstream culture is very different from the ones in the 60s in certain places, and like that brings new benefits and challenges. So like I don't really have a correct answer, or I don't have an answer to that at all, but I do think that a lot of people are working towards that.
I think it's enthusiasm, right? And sometimes there's people that are just enthusiastic, but like, how do you cultivate more enthusiasm? How do you get people to say, let's try this weird idea? I once had these friends in the Bay Area in the 2000s that they started this thing called the Permaculture Army, and I mean, it's really this one guy started it because he owned the house, but it was like they all slept in one room, and it was like bunk beds, and they woke up in the morning and did calisthenics. Like it was like totally nuts, but like it was super meaningful. And I'm sure if you spoke to, it didn't last too long because of course ultimately there was drama, but
we're already over time, but just to quickly answer your question, I don't think that, I think when you talk about what's weird and what's not weird, culture is a huge binary, right? Like the 60s revolution is very separate from my understanding of like the 80s and the 90s, where it's like we always see these shifts from one extreme to the other. What's weird today is like, I saw a tweet the other day that was like, hey, I'm hiring for my company. We